I'm Ellen Brown, President of the Rotary Club of Harrisburg. We're part of an international community and humanitarian service organization comprised of 1.4 million members in over 44,000 clubs in more than 200 countries. Rotary leads the world in volunteer service. For more than 112 years, the Rotary Club of Harrisburg has organized impactful local service projects that changes lives and creates hope where it's needed most. Please join us at a Rotary luncheon at the Hilton, service on a Monday, or a Rotary alternate meeting to meet our members who are waiting to welcome you. You can find out more about us at hbgrotary.org. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We hope to welcome you as a member soon.
Rachael Keri Williams is a dedicated preservationist and social justice advocate, driven by a profound sense of responsibility to unearth and celebrate overlooked histories. She is a member of Phi Beta Kappa, has a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors and a Master's of Social Work degree from the University of Buffalo in New York State, where she resides. In 2021, Rachael embarked on a journey to restore one of Pennsylvania's oldest remaining historically Black burial grounds. Harrisburg Lincoln's Cemetery is the final resting place of more than 10,000 African Americans who lived in the area since the 1700s. And Rachael may be giving us updated information on how many more burial sites are being discovered, especially related to how these individuals came to be interred in many ways, including mass grave sites. Lincoln Cemetery contains the graves of more than 137 Black Civil War veterans, abolitionists, agents of the Underground Railroad, leaders including William Howard Day and T. Morris Chester, and many who were enslaved in Pennsylvania before and after the Revolutionary War. As executive director and founder of SOAL, S-O-A-L, Saving Our Ancestors' Legacy, Rachael leads hands-on restoration work, genealogical research, and innovates digital humanities partnerships. Rachael's diverse background and relentless dedication make her an exceptional champion of inclusivity, empowerment, and the recognition of marginalized histories. We've recently read on Penn Live that she was just in town working with students from Messiah College. She also works with Harrisburg University and Kutztown University students and could soon be working with Harrisburg Area Community College. He's the president. Whether restoring a forgotten cemetery or developing grassroots digital tools, Rachael's work bridges knowledge gaps, fosters community, and integrates overlooked perspectives. Her multifaceted efforts are revitalizing narratives long relegated to the shadows. We thank Rachael for traveling to Harrisburg to be with us today. It is an honor to introduce Rachael Keri Williams.
I'm gonna start with a video that's gonna have still attached to its base, most likely face down, several feet under the ground. Well, there it is. Jeff found it. Working on resetting this headstone. Caroline Struthers. That is a pretty crazy one. Headstone is attached to the base with pins.
There is power hiding our slavery behind bars. There is power in forcing them to work. There is power in labeling them all criminal, so we can ignore how injustice works. There is power in claiming that there's two sides. There is power in declaring that you're heard. There is power equating a genocide to anything but an unnamed grave in the earth. There is power hiding our slavery behind bars. There is power in forcing them to work. There is power in labeling them all criminal, so we can ignore how injustice works. There is power in claiming that there's two sides. There is power in declaring that you're heard. There is power equating a genocide to anything but an unnamed grave in the earth. There is power hiding our slavery behind bars. There is power in forcing them to work. There is power in labeling them all criminal, so we can ignore how injustice works. There is power in claiming that there's two sides. There is power in declaring that you're heard. There is power equating a genocide to anything but an unnamed grave in the earth. I'm from the land.
Over 80 years,
Power hiding our slavery.
this has not been read.
There is power in forcing them to work. There is power in labeling them all criminal, so we can ignore how injustice works. There is power in claiming that there's two sides. There is power in declaring that you're heard. There is power equating a genocide to anything but an unnamed grave in the earth.
So how did we get there? That was last weekend, last month, last restoration weekend. And we meet every month and have volunteers drop in Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from noon to dusk on 3rd and the Berg weekend. I'm from Buffalo, New York, grew up there. My grandparents lived in Baltimore, Maryland. They were at Morgan State University, and we would drive through Harrisburg, and I knew my grandfather was born here and raised here, but we never stopped or got out of the car until my grandfather passed away in 1989, and I went to Lincoln Cemetery for the first time for his funeral. When I was there, my grandmother said she was going to be buried in Maine with her family, and she said, it's okay, you know, because he's surrounded by his family and his brothers that he served with in the war. And it was 2019 when I remembered her saying that, when I had started doing family history research. And I was like, who were those other family members that Grandma said were around him? Because I didn't know that we had other family that was here. And so I and my nephew came down. We went first to our family's property that they founded in Yellow Hill outside of Biglerville and in Adams County. And they had a cemetery and a school there and a small free Black community, and were a stop on the Underground Railroad. The cemetery there was destroyed. All the headstones had been used as a foundation for someone's house. And we came to Harrisburg the next day and were expecting to see something better, and we found dug up graves and human bones all around the cemetery, and very few headstones. Less than 200 were visible at that time. It was extremely overgrown, and we couldn't find the family that we were looking for. So we went, back to Buffalo, and after going and looking for the homes that they lived in, and those were gone too. Got back to Buffalo and was like, I can't leave those ancestors' bones on the ground like that. And And there's nothing to do. There's no one to call. There's no one to blame, but there is someone responsible. And I believe we're all responsible. There are over 10,000 people buried in Lincoln Cemetery. And now over 143 Civil War veterans. It's like we find more every day. I have found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of headstones, like that one that you saw in the beginning. Caroline Williams is perhaps not on any other record, right? If you were an African-American person living in the 19th century, then you maybe didn't make it onto a record, and especially if you were coming from the South. You have a very hard time finding stories about your ancestors in newspapers or obituaries when you get back into the 1800s, even the early 1900s. So it's hard, especially when you're in a place like Harrisburg, where the old 8th Ward is gone, where all of these records and physical places of the community are gone, to reconnect that history and to really understand who people were, who, makes up a community, what their lives were like, what things did they do. And the only place where we can still find that is in a cemetery. And once you start putting these pieces together, then you start recreating that community that was demolished for the Capitol complex, for example. We also have a horrible history in this country of destroying African-American burial grounds. Buildings are built on top of them. I'm sure you've seen in the news what is going on in Florida. But the oldest Black cemetery in Harrisburg is under the Harrisburg train station. The cemetery that existed right before Lincoln Cemetery was founded, Harris Free Cemetery, is under the PennDOT building on Arsenal Boulevard. In all of these cases, it's never clear how many actual people were moved or disinterred from those sites. We do know, because we have found headstones from all of the earlier Black cemeteries at Lincoln, that many people were moved. Thousands of people were moved. And that includes people that were enslaved in Dauphin County and Harrisburg in the 1700s and the 1800s. Because it's a little known fact that if you were born enslaved prior to 1780, you remained a slave for life. So you were never given your freedom until the 1840s, I believe. Other stories that have come to light. That was just the story of Richard Smith, and you can read about him on the website. I like him because he was disabled, a giant, very simple. He befriended trains, and his story is written all across the country. When he dies, his obituary is published north, south, east, west, but he's not remembered today. He doesn't have a plaque at the train station. Nobody tells his story anymore. And he saved thousands and thousands and thousands of lives. So he used to run in front of the trains at the Harrisburg train station, and you had all these different stations at that time in the mid-1800s, and he would run across and flag people, down, push them out of the way of an oncoming train, and go about his business. So he was famous for saving all these lives, but his story isn't known. He's buried at Lincoln Cemetery. We get something sacred back by reclaiming these stories and by honoring these people's legacies. It's healing to be there. It's beautiful to be there. I like seeing how many different types of species of ladybugs I can see on a restoration weekend, and the hawks that that, you know, that fly by, and even the foxes and the groundhogs, although I don't like them that much. We feel like we are being healed when we work there, and we have a very diverse group, a bunch of teenagers who come every month, and sometimes we get elementary school students as well who come with their families or their older siblings. Beyond that, the actual restoration work, which we've just learned how to do, and since 2021, I did not have any interest in cemeteries or know anything about restoring historic marble headstones until spring 2022, when a restoration specialist came and taught us. Before that, I didn't know what we were going to do next after we cleared all the brush. I was like, we'll just keep going back and maybe something will turn up. And this guy came from Connecticut. No idea how we got there except our social media presence. So that's like where we started, and that's now. That's the exact same spot. Started and now. We do genealogy research on starting with people that are buried at Lincoln Cemetery and then going out, because you never know. When you have so many names missing, you don't know how all these people connect. By doing that research, we've started to piece together new histories, like different people that were instrumental in the Underground Railroad, that at some point were here, but at other points were in other parts of the country, ran the Underground Railroad in Ohio, or they were in Maryland, and then they were in Harrisburg. They were in Philadelphia, then they were in Harrisburg. They were in Connecticut, then they were in Harrisburg. They were in Massachusetts, they're in Virginia. They're down in North Carolina, they're in Alabama. The lines radiate all across the country from this place because it was such an important transportation hub. So many people went through here. Tens of thousands of people that escaped slavery before and during the Civil War were here. There was a huge, what you would typically call a contraband camp at Reservoir Park, where the Civil War Museum is, amazingly. And throughout the Civil War, that is where escaping slaves from Maryland and Virginia set up camp and lived during that time. And then they were moved out in order to make Reservoir Park. So a lot of these pieces about the community and the history that people did not know before are revealed because at Lincoln, people are buried in family plots. They purchased plots at the same time their neighbors purchased a plot. And their neighbors were people that migrated from the same parts of the country that they did. So all of a sudden, more and more and more comes together about who these people were, and mapping the relationships and understanding the connections with the old 8th Ward and where people were coming from. This is the software that we've been developing in order to be able to map people's migrations and use genealogical information, AI and machine learning in order to connect those things. Because there aren't any tools out there that help you really to do that, to reclaim those histories and visualize that huge number of people and how they move together and what their relationships are. Black history is not lost, it's just buried, literally. And to reveal it, we have to dig it up, not the bones. I prefer to leave them in the ground. And when I find them not in the ground, I rebury them. But definitely those headstones with people's names on them. So many names. When we started, Find a Grave had around 1,000 people named that were buried in Lincoln Cemetery. We are approaching 5,400 people named on Find a Grave, and that's not slowing down. We digitized thousands of burial records in 2021 and 2021, And we are working with community partners to transcribe those handwritten records and get burial locations, to digitally map the cemetery and mark where the stones are. We use drones to show how the cemetery has changed over time, what we do, and also what it did back in the past, and see that and share that history with other people. We have been unfunded and unpaid since we began. So my family and I just started coming because we couldn't not come back. And then we came to love it and kept coming back, and more people joined us. But it has been very difficult to share that story and to make people aware of the importance of Lincoln Cemetery. I've had, every time I'm on the news, people come to the cemetery in the next couple days and they're like, oh my goodness, I never knew this was here. I have ancestors buried in this cemetery and I did not know. I thought they were only in William Howard Day, or, I only had people that were buried in Carlisle or in York or in Lebanon. And nope, it's like there's a pretty good chance that you have people that are buried in Lincoln Cemetery, even if you're not from Harrisburg, because of that transportation hub thing. And so it's trying to explain the importance of Lincoln Cemetery and restoring Lincoln Cemetery to everyone, that it's not about it being just dead people. It's not just a cemetery. It is our history, and it's the only place that we can recover it. It's the only place that we can recover it. It's the only place where these stories are that have not been told. I believe that it is something that can fundamentally heal our nation to have these stories. For me, like, it's tied to those moments in 2020 when, I watched George Floyd die, or saw Ahmaud Arbery hunted down. And what was like, how can you change this? How can you change this so that it doesn't happen again when it's been happening for so long? And I believe that the dead have the power to change that. It's easier for people to see dead people as human than alive people, because they're not threatening. And if you recognize those dead people as human, then you start to see the alive people as human too. That's why I go back. I think that's why we all do. And it would be wonderful if you want to join us. Our opportunities are many. We like to partner with groups, schools, universities, because they like to handle a project and work independently on a project that is run and designed in partnership with us. So anyone is always welcome to come to a volunteer restoration weekend, but a project is ideal outside of that, because I do pretty much everything in terms of this management and I'm still unpaid. So that means website development, social media posts, genealogy research, fundraising, grant writing, all of that. And as 1 to 2 people working on that, it's an awful lot. I think it's an 80+ hour work week. And the driving back and forth to Harrisburg. So that's a really, hopefully, exciting thing, is to think about a project like that. And that can be a meaningful and longer term or shorter term type of a thing, whether it's replanting the historic tree canopy and that's what you want to focus on, or cradle graves, which get tons of flowers and wildflowers. And I've done a bit of that gardening with volunteers, but we have, probably over 100 of these enclosed cradle graves that were always planted. If you want to get goats and sheep in and some alpacas and have a couple weeks of alpacas, that would also work very well. There we go. I think I covered it.